Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now, it's not just a rush to world government based on secret trade treaties or on the sky is falling climate alarmism. No, we also see that there's a full rush across the West, Europe and America, to an Orwellian state, to a brave new world. Wherever there's some kind of decadent entertainment, that is celebrated. But whenever there is political speech, that is repressed, stomped on with an iron boot. Take a look at this new law coming out of Spain. 1984 comes to Europe, the end of free speech in Spain. This is an article from Zero Hedge. They say Spain has shown that it is fully on board with the Brussels authoritarian direction of ending democracy. Those in power have simply convinced themselves that the people do not understand what's good for them, so they must impose their will on the rest of the people by raw force. Now listen to these different laws that have just gone into effect today. Number one, if you photograph security personnel, share these images on social media, you can get up to €30,000 fine. If you tweet or retweet information, even retweet information, about the, quote, location of an organized protest, that can now be interpreted as an act of terrorism. Snowden-like whistleblowing is now defined as terrorism. Visiting or consulting terrorist websites, even for investigative purposes, can be interpreted as an act of terrorism. And don't tell any jokes about the royal families. Any satirical comment against the royal family is a new crime against the crown. We are going back into the Dark Ages, where you could not say anything about the king. And of course, the king now is not just the royal family that they have in Spain, the royal family they have in the UK, but of course, it is also those who are supposed to be our elected representatives. Look at the sixth one here. No more hassling elected members of the government or even local authorities. Even though you elect them, you see, they're not your elected representatives. They are now your authoritarian masters. You just get to pick a new master as a slave every couple of years. They say, even if they say one thing in order to be elected, but then they go on and do the exact opposite. No, don't hassle them, and don't, number 8, protest in any spontaneous way outside of Parliament. That is now illegal. We're not that far from that here in the United States, quite frankly. We just don't bother to pass laws. We have had situations in the last several presidential election cycles in both parties' major conventions. They have taken demonstrators far away from wherever they're holding the convention, put them in cages and said, you can exercise your free speech right here. One of the most important aspects of free speech, of course, was to address our grievances publicly. But now that is being put in a cage down the street. We're told that free speech is simply about getting as decadent as you want in public. That is not the case. We're being sold a Brave New World agenda, and if we don't buy into it, if we try to talk about something serious, about politics, about things that really affect our lives, again, we get the Orwellian treatment. Take a look at what's going on in the UK, of course. Top computer security expert warns that David Cameron's plan to ban encryption would destroy the internet. This is an article that's up on Infowars.com from Liberty Blitzkrieg. They point out that he wants to essentially ban encryption. That's the way that he wants to shut this down. As Bruce Schneier said, my immediate reaction was disbelief, followed by confusion and despair. The article goes on to say, when it comes to the war on terror, the UK embraces a unique form of paranoia and hatred for civil liberties that leaves pretty much all the other Western nations in the dust. They say, of course, Cameron is now declaring war on encryption. In other words, a war on private communications between citizens. And just in case you're feeling good about the fact that you don't live in the UK, understand that U.S. FBI Chief James Comey fully is behind this same agenda. He's trying to sell the same thing in the United States. Well, joining us now is Joe Biggs, because we want to talk about what is happening in the United States in an even more subtle way, an attack on free speech. Well, Joe, there's an article on Infowars.com today, a Twitter campaign to encourage people to rip down Confederate flags. You just had somebody send you a Confederate flag. Presumably it wasn't part of this Twitter campaign. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so a friend of a friend sent me this. She's very liberal and really just wanted to kind of part ways with it. She doesn't agree with it. She's kind of jumped on the bandwagon. I don't think she quite understands the history.
Got to get it out of the house.
Yeah, she don't think she quite understands the history behind it, because this isn't the Confederate flag. It's the battle flag first and foremost, and this was the battle flag from Tennessee. So
Army of Northern Virginia.
Yeah, Northern Virginia. That's right, Northern Virginia. So there's a lot of people out there who see headlines and they regurgitate it. You know, we keep seeing that people want to dig up these Confederate war generals.
Yeah.
And it's just because of regurgitated stuff. And it's the same thing with this flag campaign. People automatically are seeing that it means hate without really knowing the true meaning behind it or what it is. And they're running around. Now, if you run on someone's property, I myself, if I see someone jumping out of a car and running at my house at full speed, ripping something off my property, I'm going to react. And that's what's going to happen. I think this is retarded in a sense because I'm scared that people are going to end up getting shot. Someone's going to get hurt. This isn't funny. You're going beyond that. That's a criminal act. You're stealing.
Well, Joe, this is a part of a divide and conquer strategy. And of course, the thing that concerns me most about this is how easily people are fooled, how easily they can be, they can fall into this thing of 1984, the 2 minutes of hate that we saw directed at Goldstein. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, what the history is. They're willing, as I talked about on Friday, they're willing to take Song of the South and flush that down the memory hole along with everything else, when that was a book that was set up. The guy who wrote that compiled stories that had been told to him by slaves, and it was after slavery was over, but he wanted to honor their story tales. Aesop's Fables, that was written by a Greek slave. You know, all slaves were not black people in the South. We've had slavery throughout history, and when you take away
slavery still going on.
Exactly. When we take away Uncle Remus because it has some tangential, connection to plantations and that sort of thing, then basically what you're doing is you're eradicating African-American culture as well. It's not just white culture, it's not just Southern culture, but it's African-American culture. Instead, we ought to be selecting the best out of all these cultures, celebrating them, looking at the brotherhood of man, looking at the fact that you've got in that movie, Song of the South, which Disney has always refused to sell here in the United States, you've got children, black and white, sitting at the feet of an older man who happens to be black and listening to his words of wisdom, talking about the Brow Rabbit and the Tar Baby and all these wonderful allegories that they have in that story.
Well, people act like this flag is responsible for the killings in Charleston. What happened to holding individuals accountable for their actions? Why is there this mass campaign?
Well, they never do that. They always seize on one particular incident, and then they'll go after whether it's guns or whether it is culture now, a culture attack that they want to go after. It's never about that individual. It's always about something else that they make.
But where does it end, though? Where does it ever stop?
I don't think it's going to end, Joe. You know, this is one thing that really bothered me. And of course, this is now, we see a new book from the author of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's Go Set a Watchman. And what they've done is they've taken Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, somebody who has been a hero to many people, including myself. He's just a fictional character, but this is a lawyer who stood up for due process. He stood up for treating people equally. And now they have put out a book that reinvents him as a Ku Klux Klan member, somebody who is rabidly racist because, Joe, we're not allowed to have good role models, people that we can look up to, people that we can learn from, and especially not if they're white Southern males.
As soon as you do anything positive, nowadays they just want to completely find something to demonize you.
Yeah.
And it happens time and time again.
Yes, absolutely. One more article here before we go to break. The Maryland state song is now being targeted because it has Confederate sympathies, and so they want to remove the state song of Maryland. This is a good example of people not understanding what their history is. When you look at the lyrics of this, and of course it's sung to the tune of O Tannenbaum or O Christmas Tree, the despot's heel is on thy shore, his torch is at thy temple door, avenge the patriotic gore, whatever, that fleck the streets of Baltimore. So there were some riots there. They don't understand. When they talk about the despot's heel is on your shore, they were talking about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln had just locked up a third of the Maryland state legislature, as well as jailing one of their congressmen, not charging them with a crime, but because he knew that they were sympathetic to secession. So to keep that from happening, he essentially enacted the NDAA. If you don't understand what the history is, it's going to be shoved down your throat until you understand what it is. And so people ought to take a step back and learn a little bit of history. Go back and do something besides reading the hagiographies that are in the history books. Joe, your final comment. We just got about
Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, for example, they were wanting to dig up his grave. Now, a lot of people don't know the history behind this man, but he was actually kicked out from the KKK because he didn't agree with killing black people.
We can't be bothered with that kind of detail.
I mean,
we just have to expose.
But all it takes is going and reading a book and looking for the information and finding out the truth instead of just turning on Fox News, CNN, and regurgitating the same lies over and over again.
That's what's so scary.
He even gave a lot of his
mentality.
property away to slaves.
Exactly. That's what's so scary is the herd mentality and how easily people are pushed into a kind of a Jacobin approach where they just go out and start rounding people up and take them to the guillotine. I mean, I guess that's going to be the next thing. Maybe when they dig up his body, they can take him to the guillotine.
I want to make this announcement now. It's going up as we speak, a day early.
To celebrate the birth of our country and give a big thanks to all the info warriors out there, we are now offering free shipping on every item shipped out of the InfoWarsStore.com warehouse. That's free shipping on all t-shirts, books, and DVDs. Free shipping on Molon Labe and 1776 belt buckles, which are also 25% off while supplies last. Free shipping on all of our InfoWarsLife.com nutraceuticals. If it's in the InfoWarsStore.com warehouse, it's shipping for free, all during the month of July. It's our way of saying thanks to the true heart and soul of this operation, who stand beside us and support us as we wage an info war for liberty and freedom for all. InfoWarsStore.com, free shipping for the month of July.